Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The Israeli embassy in Cairo is attacked and evacuated. Gilad Shalit's father delivers a message here in the States, remembering 9/11 at the Wall Street Synagogue, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The Israeli embassy in Cairo was attacked by thousands of Egyptians last week. The mob pulled down the embassy's walls, stormed into the building, and occupied it, taking 6 Israeli security guards hostage for several hours. The ambassador, embassy personnel, their families, and Israelis who were staying at the embassy were immediately evacuated and taken back to Israel by the Israeli Air Force. But the 6 Israeli security guards were temporarily stranded, imprisoned in their own embassy. Egyptian commandos rescued the Israelis in a special rescue operation. They were brought home by Israeli Air Force jets. The embassy remains closed for the time being, and the administration of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not said when it will reopen. The attack lays bare some of the new realities Israel is facing. Firstly, it reveals the popular Egyptian stance as rather opposed to Israel, in a manner that is challenging to the interim Egyptian government. Secondly, it reveals that the Egyptian government is willing to use its military to try to meet its commitments to Israel, even if that means dealing aggressively with some of the more extreme elements of the Egyptian population. Third, and perhaps most significant, is what this reveals about the United States alliance with Israel. The strength of the alliance was evident in the way Israel relied on the United States throughout the crisis. The Israeli government could not reach Egyptian officials as the crisis was unfolding and reached out to the White House for assistance. It was the White House that contacted Egyptian officials to discuss the situation, and President Barack Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remained in touch throughout the crisis. After the crisis concluded, Netanyahu released a statement that spoke of Obama at length, saying, quote, "I would like to express my gratitude to the President of the United States, Barack Obama. I asked for his help. This was a decisive and fateful moment. He said, I will do everything I can." And so he did. He used every considerable means and influence of the United States to help us. We owe him a special measure of gratitude. This attests to the strong alliance between Israel and the United States. This alliance between Israel and the United States is especially important in these times of political storms and upheavals in the Middle East. As opposed to the U.S.-Israel relationship, the future relationship between Israel and Egypt has been a somewhat open question since the end of the Mubarak regime. Tensions heated up after the terror attacks launched by Hamas against southern Israel last month, when Israeli soldiers responding to the attack shot and killed 6 Egyptian security officers. That episode set off a series of protests and episodes of vandalism at the Israeli embassy, with this latest episode the greatest example. But while Israel's relationship with Egypt is less than clear, an antagonistic relationship with Turkey is increasingly evident. Turkey had been the only Muslim country allied with Israel, but Turkey announced last week the end of its alliance with Israel after Israel did not comply with an ultimatum in which Turkey requested an apology for the deaths of Turkish citizens on a flotilla headed for Gaza last year. Turkey then expelled Israel's ambassador. The news this week is that Turkey is removing much of the gray area that lay between friend and foe by equipping its fighter jets to be able to fire on Israeli targets. Turkey's fighter jets are U.S.-made F-16s, which are manufactured with a targeting system that prevents pilots from shooting Israeli targets, identifying them as friendly. Now Turkey has manipulated that system to no longer identify Israeli targets as friendly and allow Turkish pilots to fire on those Israeli targets. Fiery rhetoric was also added to the equation by Turkey's prime minister, who said of the flotilla last year in an interview with Al Jazeera this week, quote, "It is cause for war, but we decided to act in line with Turkey's grandeur and showed patience." Turkey's prime minister was in Egypt this week to formalize a new alliance between the two countries. And as Israel is increasingly isolated on the international scene, the expected vote on a Palestinian state at the United Nations next week is showing just who is lining up on either side. The bid for recognition as a state will almost certainly fail in the Security Council, owing to a promised United States veto, but a somewhat upgraded symbolic status could result from cooperation by many other nations. Russia announced this week that it will support the Palestinians, joining China. France and the United Kingdom, the other 2 permanent Security Council members, have not yet said how they will vote. Meantime, the Obama administration is beginning to learn of the international consequences it might face for standing with Israel. A leading member of Saudi Arabia's ruling class wrote in an op-ed for the New York Times that a veto by the U.S. would mean, quote, Saudi Arabia would no longer be able to cooperate with America in the same way it historically has, including opposing the government of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in Iraq, and Saudi Arabia might part ways with Washington in Afghanistan and Yemen as well. The article also cited Saudi military support for Bahrain's monarchy and noted the Obama administration's opposition to that. Meanwhile, the Obama administration is putting the Palestinian Authority on notice that the U.S. could push back hard against the Palestinians for pursuing statehood unilaterally at the UN. The administration sent officials to meet with PA President Mahmoud Abbas last week to urge him not to pursue the vote, warning that much of the $500 million in annual aid from the U.S. could be in jeopardy. Of course, Israel's relationship with the Palestinian Authority, which governs the West Bank, is only part of the story. Its relationship with Hamas, which controls Gaza, is something different. One particular problem Israel has with Hamas is the continued imprisonment of captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Shalit's father, Noam Shalit, was in America last week, as Christian Needham reports.
New York City's political elite gathered last week to pay honor to captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, as Wednesday, September 7th, was declared Gilad Shalit Day in New York City. Council Speaker Christine Quinn oversaw the ceremony, joined by her fellow council members and Shalit's father, Noam. He spoke about the continuing plight of his son, who was captured by Hamas in June of 2006.
My son Gilad is held in captivity, for 1900 days now, today. 1900 days and 1900 lonely nights. Every day is harder, and we appreciate any help and attention given to Gilad. He has been held in Gaza Strip by the Palestinian terrorists, by the Palestinian Hamas, in total isolation with no access to him whatsoever. Our family, my family, is living now on the sidewalk in front of Prime Minister residence for over a year now. We're waiting there over a year to hear good news about our son. We left, as you know, we left our jobs, we left our home, and we are expecting that our son will be released immediately and unconditionally. The last sign of life that we received from him was 2 years ago, right in September 2009. Gilad was last week was 25 years old. 5 years of his life, 1/5 of his life, he spent in captivity.
Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations Chairman Richard Stone, whose organization helped facilitate the day's event with the city, articulated the anger felt by many American Jews who have followed Staff Sergeant Shalit's captivity from afar.
The outrageous nature of the kidnapping, the sadistic nature of the negotiations for Gilad's release with stop and start and incredible offers of hundreds and thousands of prisoners in exchange for one innocent and illegally captured Israeli prisoner are simply indications and symbolistic of the challenges that Israel faces against a terroristic enemy that is inhumane, that lacks respect for the law, and that lacks respect for life.
Noam Shalit addressed that point of legality in his son's capture as well.
In all of Gilad's years in captivity, he hadn't received any Red Cross or other NGOs visit, and was not given any chance to contact home. Gilad is being held by Palestinian terrorists with no sunlight and without any basic human rights, clearly against international humanitarian law.
Shalit expressed optimism, however, about his son's future.
Hopefully Gilad will soon be released. We accept that both sides, Israel government, Israel Prime Minister, and the Palestinian will reach very soon a deal, an agreement to release Gilad in exchange of Palestinian prisoners. That's the only way, that's the only alternative that is possible now after so many years, after so many attempts to release him. And he will be back home with us before the Jewish holidays, before Rosh Hashanah, which is very close now.
Speaker Quinn also noted the proximity of Gilad Shalit Day to the emotionally resonant 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on New York.
As you were speaking, I was struck by, we will all say countless times this week that we remember, we'll never forget, as it relates to 9/11. But I just wanted to make the pledge on behalf of all of us in the City Council that we also will always remember Gilad. We will never forget until he is home with you, and even then, never forget the struggle and years he has been away from your family.
To hear more from the Gilad Shalit Day ceremony, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Looking for solutions in the Middle East, an event at the 92nd Street Y last week suggested women are the answer. Christian Neaton was there.
Two women whose families hail from opposite sides of the Jewish and Arab-Israeli cultural divide came together on the same stage at the 92nd Street Y this week. Rula Jabriel, author of the book and screenplay for the recent film Maral, appeared with Amalia Dayan, granddaughter of the late Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, in a program titled How Women Are the Key to Change in the Middle East, which was moderated by 92Y President Thomas Kaplan. And while the two women are now close friends, Jabriel noted that their relationship was initially colored by family prejudices.
I never told Amalia this, but every time my father would see her grandfather on the television, he would roll his eyes like he wanted to strangle him almost. Because whatever a defense minister represents in Israel for us as minority, as Arabs live in East Jerusalem, and my father for sure lived the 67 war, represented something else. So when my friend told me we were going to lunch at her place, I was a bit concerned.
But Jabriel's concerns were soon relieved.
As soon as I saw her, and I should say, I don't know where her husband is sitting, her lovely husband, Adam, who's a great writer, I should say. I thought, I have more in common with this girl than all of the people that, with all due respect to New York's fellows, with anybody that I saw her. I felt that I find not only a friend, a sister, I find somebody that not only comes from my same background, believe in the same thing I believe in, democracy, peace, and longing for and dreaming about the future for our country that is different.
To hear more from the 92nd Street Y talk between Rula Jabriel and Amalia Dayan, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. The 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks was this past weekend. One synagogue close to the World Trade Center has a particular story to tell, as Meredith Gansman found out.
The Wall Street Synagogue is located just 4 blocks from Ground Zero, and after the September 11 terrorist attacks, hundreds fleeing the disaster took refuge inside this house of prayer. In honor of the 10th anniversary of 9/11, the Wall Street Synagogue hosted a week of remembrance, reflection, and renewal. At a memorial service before the anniversary, synagogue congregants and city officials gathered to express how the synagogue served them on 9/11. Rabbi Hager called his synagogue a public haven. While the building is regularly open several times a day for prayer services, on 9/11, it never closed.
All day long, people, many of them dazed, in states of shock, wandered and sat in pews to collect their thoughts and to recover from the shock of what they had seen.
Hager also showed the hat he wore on 9/11. He never cleaned the ash off the fedora in remembrance of the day of destruction. The memorial service also honored the synagogue's neighbors, Fire Engine Company 6, whose firefighters were the second company to reach the Twin Towers. Firemen Al Siciliano and Chris Perrone lit candles in candlesticks shaped like the Twin Towers. The Engine 6 Firehouse and the Wall Street Synagogue have always had a close and friendly relationship. This is partly because they share a party wall.
The congregation for the Wall Street Synagogue has been so supportive, it's like we all work for each other.
For more on this story, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.